Hello, horror fans, and welcome to episode 72 of Funny Book Splatter, a horror comics podcast brought to you by HorrorTalk.com. I am your host, James Ferguson. This week, for the first time, I have not one, not two, but three guests on the show. I spoke with Nick Keller, Conor Nolan, and Kelly Fitzpatrick, the writer, artist, and colorist, respectively, for Bedtime Games. This is an awesome new horror series from Dark Horse Comics, set to debut on Wednesday, June 27th. It has a definite Stephen King vibe to it, too, as the comic follows three kids who head into a tunnel looking for mischief and end up uncovering a horrifying monster. Nick can be found at his official website, nickfkeller.com, and on Twitter as @nickfkeller. Conor can be found at his official website, conornolan.com. That's one N and one L, and on Twitter at Conor_draws. And Kelly can be found on Twitter at Wasted Wings. You could follow Kelly's dog on Instagram at BostonBoyArchie and Connor's dog at Mayor of Puppytown, also on Instagram. You'll figure out why I mentioned that in the show. Anyway, I put out a call last week to get some more ratings and reviews for Funny Book Splatter on iTunes, and we got a bunch on the board. Thank you to everyone that took some time to leave those. It's very much appreciated. If you haven't done so already, it would be super awesome if you left a positive review and or rating on iTunes for the show. That kind of stuff can help spread the word. Alright, that is it for the news and updates this week. Now on to episode 72 of Funny Book Splatter with my guests Nick Keller, Conor Nolan, and Kelly Fitzpatrick. Okay, so to start us off, if you had to describe Bedtime Games, whether it was like an elevator pitch or on a convention floor or something like that, how would you describe the book to someone?
Yeah, so I guess I could take the first crack at that. The way I kind of describe like the first issue as we kick off is these three friends basically are starting their senior year just by trying to like wreak havoc a little bit. And they go down below into this tunnel below their school that they think they're kind of just going to find alcohol and steal tests and stuff like that. But they actually set loose this ancient evil that wants to prey on their worst nightmares. So that's basically the elevator pitch of it. And then that's kind of you probably read issue 1, but that's how the whole book starts off. And then it gets more and more complicated from there. So yeah, it's kind of about this. I wanted to write about like a Sandman kind of character, but more on the nightmare dream side. So that's where this main character comes in, and that's like the very distilled version of it. Right.
So would that be the Mr. Bedtime character, or is that something we want to talk about or avoid?
Exactly. Yeah, we can totally talk about it. Basically, the crux of the story is I wanted to write a story that was about dreams, but wasn't too fantastical, wasn't confusing, but was very like grounded in these characters, these three friends. So I spent a lot of time coming up with what their three backstories were. One of the girls, Avery, has a mother who was killed in this like horrific, brutal robbery on their old bookstore. Another guy, his brother is unfortunately like has cancer. And the other one has like abusive parents and is kind of struggling with this art. So I wanted to really nail down these three characters and have them be like the beating heart of the book, as I built out the mythology as well. So my main focus was these characters starting off.
Yeah, I think that the grounding of the characters, especially in that first issue, definitely comes through in a big way. Like you kind of instantly sympathize with them and get an understanding of where they're coming from, why this is this kind of like last hurrah before they start their last year. And of course it doesn't go, how they planned it all, because this is a horror book. That's right. What we have to expect for something like that.
Exactly. Yeah, that was the tricky part. I really wanted to set, like, Conor and I worked on these first 6 pages with the, I think at the end of the 6th page, we kind of revealed this dead body who was pretty important to like the story so far. But like at the beginning, I didn't really have any ideas. So I just wanted to like throw out horror elements, but I really was making sure the characters were coming through. Because, I feel like if the characters aren't there, like no one's really going to care, about what happens to them. So I wanted to spend the majority of the first issue. It's actually 6 pages longer. I think it's 28 or 29 pages. I spent the majority of the first half of the issue just like setting each of them up. And as the story goes along, each issue is kind of focused on a different person. So the first one is focused on this girl, Avery. The second one more so on the guy, Owen. And then it goes from there. So they each kind of get their their chance in the spotlight to get deeper into their character.
That's interesting, because I feel like each of the main characters kind of gets some time to shine in that first issue to get you get this like good basis of like, okay, here's this person, here's who they are right now, here's the trauma that they've been through in their life that kind of got them to this point. So I'm interested to see how all them I guess how they can expand upon that.
Yeah, I mean this issue really took the most revisions, because I just wrote that sewer scene or whatever over and over, just like wasn't working, because I didn't know the characters yet. Like that's the tricky part about writing issue 1 is like, you don't really know who these people are. And you have to like spend time with writing, like, what are they like? What are they afraid of? What are they, whatever. And it's important for like a writer just to know these things, because otherwise the characters are just agreeing with each other and there's no conflict. So I had to make sure that I had to figure out who these people were. So it took several drafts to get to where the final printed version was, and it was due. But I think Conor could probably speak to more about drawing the characters, because he does a great job with all the expressions, and so maybe he wants to talk about the drawing of each of these characters.
Please do, because I think they're a lot of their personality definitely comes through in their design.
Yeah, I think I tried to make them each kind of stand like singularly by themselves in design. I thought that each one has an equally important kind of background to the story, and they're bringing their own kind of influence and whatnot. And so I wanted the three of them to really exist on their own in terms of, I don't know what they looked like. I don't know. It's I wanted them to be youthful because they're teenagers, and life is hard when you're a teenager, but it's like it's even harder when you have this like hellish adversary who weaponizes nightmares after you. And
well, we've all been through that, so yeah, everyone understands where they're coming from.
Of course.
Common symptom of your teenage years. So yeah, I tried to put myself in a mindset of being back in high school and what that was like, and hanging out with friends and getting into mischief, and that's the kind of the mindset I was in when I started this, for sure.
Yeah, I definitely think that comes through, because these feel like like they're people you'd want to hang out with, and they may not be like the cool kids, and they don't check off like these stereotypes of like, oh well, here he's the jock and she's the cheerleader, or he's the nerd or something like that. Yeah. They just feel like regular kids, and it's like they don't fit into any of those buckets, but they're like they could. I don't know if that means that they're like the outsider kids or whatever, or maybe that's just what I identified with more personally.
Yeah,
but
yeah,
I think that works to kind of get their personalities across more, because they feel more relatable. And I think you guys hit on the nail on the head there to say, well, that's how you're going to care more about them, especially for a horror story. I feel like that's even more important for a horror comic, because if it's just blood and gore, like, yeah, there's a place for that, and like, there's slasher stories and those kind of things can work well, but I feel like a horror tale will get you so much more and like get under your skin so much more if you actually care about the characters. And I think that comes through in Bedtime Games to start with, that like, oh, okay, I care about them. And then you see something like that, the skeleton in the water, and you're like, oh, this is what we're in for here.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, that was
all by design, for sure.
Yeah.
And that continues throughout. I gave Conor is amazing at drawing skeletons and nightmares and all this stuff, but he also can do the expressive aspect of these characters. So that was like number one for me when we just first started everything, and it's worked out super well so far. And I think, what you said about like the stereotypes is super true, because all these kids have gone through like horrific stuff, and there were, like, we write some scenes later where I was like, it'd be so easy to make a character cry or do this, but like not everyone reacts that way. So it was super fun to like kind of not go I always like made sure I tried to go one way when people would think we go another, if that makes any sense. Like not do the cliche thing if possible.
Cool. Now, Kelly, some of these scenes where they look at the kind of, I guess, their flashbacks to their lives, it looks like there's like a slightly I guess a lighter shade to those. Is that purposeful to kind of make it look more like a memory?
Yeah, I took a lot of influence from like classic fairy tale illustrators. Like Conor's work reminds me a lot of like Golden Age illustration stuff. So all of the palettes, I took a bunch of like old paintings and color picked from them to like make a palette to sort of get that vibe to match his style. But yeah, that's all purposeful.
Yeah, and the book definitely has like this timeless quality to it, where like I mean it could be happening now or it could be happening 30 years ago. Is that because like no one picks up a cell phone, but like they also still feel like they're totally. They could just be modern day kids.
Yeah, that's who knows if they'll eventually. I don't think they pick up any cell phones this whole game. I mean, this whole book. I don't want to say games, but yeah, that was kind of by design, but also not really. Like I just really focused on like I could have like had them have cell phones or whatever, but it just doesn't seem to make sense for the story. And I feel like it's good to leave some of that out, but also there is some technology later, I think. But yeah, it's usually more satisfying for me personally when it's just it could take place at any time ambiguously. But that's not to say like I wouldn't inject technology at some point. But it didn't really make sense for this time. They didn't bring a cell phone. That actually doesn't seem that smart. But maybe I don't know when this takes place. It says present day.
True. So I mean, but on the other hand, though, like a cell phone is like the sure killer in a horror comic or any kind of horror story, because like at the end of the day, if they could just pick up a phone and call 911, well, there goes all the danger. Like or we know exactly where you were because we did find my iPhone and we found where the kids were. So we're all set.
Yeah, easy. I know that. That's the plot hole with all these modern day stories, but
that's what they said killed X-Files. Yeah, this is
too much modern stuff.
Yeah,
well, yeah, it would make sense because like if someone can whip out a cell phone and actually take a picture of the alien that they saw, then and realize it's just a rubber suit or something, well, there goes that thing. Yeah,
totally. I mean, maybe they all just have flip phones and they're like the kids who don't have iPhones. I have no idea. But, I'm trying to think of, Kelly, I was thinking about the colors for a second. Kelly did, I think it's like page in the middle somewhere. There's like this flashback page of the girl Avery where it's kind of these 4 panels of her backstory, kind of like just 4 shots. And it's kind of colored in this brown kind of, you probably remember this brown gray scale kind of color. And originally I had all this dialogue on it. Yeah, sepia. Thank you. I had all this dialogue and it was just, and I was like, I saw the art and I saw the color and I was like, just get rid of it all. Because like, I'm trying to like have as least amount of words as possible when possible. So, I just tried to delete anything so it doesn't cover up art. And that was a page that really came through, that flashback page.
That's because Connor's so good.
Exactly. I don't want to just litter balloons all over it.
I was actually, I was really happy how we were able to kind of jump around in terms of like the time stream, go from one moment in time to the other, because I think is actually, like we've been mentioning, it was because of this successfulness of Kelly's color and whatnot. So that definitely makes it a better comic.
Yeah, I think the time stuff is tough. Like, my number one thing is I don't want anyone to be confused in reading a comic book, because then it just takes you out of it. And there's just like so much info thrown at you.
It's also especially hard when like that kid's only lived maybe like 16 years, you're not jumping too much in time. You're only jumping a couple of years in time, maybe. They have lived much.
I don't think it's jarring or anything in looking at it. Like, I mean, you could have had like a little bubble. Actually, no, you do. You have a thing that says before and then now. So, I mean, they do kind of say it, but it never feels like, oh, why are they here now? Like, you could see, like, okay, Avery's younger, or she's suddenly standing above a corpse or something. Like, that's, that's not happening right now, because, she was just hanging out. Like, if you jumped from them going into this tunnel to her standing over a corpse, it's like, okay, like, did I miss a page? Like that, but I don't think it's that extent.
What happened? That's the only thing. I mean, I think I read somewhere, I think he said it, but it was like, you'd like to think like readers are pretty smart, like you said, they'll figure it out. It says before, and you've been reading the story and paying attention, like it usually makes sense. Hopefully, we'll see. But I just try to make everything as clear as possible, but also not hold the hand either.
No, I think you
out.
get the right balance with that because, you know, at the end of the day, something like this is a mystery. You know, yes, it's a horror story, but there's a mystery involved to it. You're trying to figure out what's going on, who is this character, what's he going to do, what does this mean for these people. So they have their, you know, readers have their thinking caps on as they're going through and reading the book, saying, okay, well, all right, this is it, this is a clue, this is important, you know, what does that have to do, and all those things come to like there's like subtle things too, like when they first. I don't want to, you know, if you want to cut anything out about spoilers, let me know. But when they find like that flyer or whatever from Mr. Bedtime in this tunnel, and then like the next panel, it's moved, it's changed, like that's like such like a small move, but like, you know, you could definitely see that there's something different with it, and that is creepy as hell because it's like this idea, like
that's kind of picture,
and then it moves.
Yeah, it's such a good idea.
I don't know. I think the type of horror I really like kind of it all comes down to subtlety, I think, because it's that question that's brewing in your mind of like, why did that happen and stuff, which causes the horror and the scariness of the situation. I think it's that curiosity that kind of makes it intense, and I think that can really be done on like a small scale and still have big results.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, I think like you said, the like comic readers especially can really pick up on small details. I feel like just because there's so much to see. And like you said, we don't spell out like no characters like, oh my God, it moved or something, because I think someone would rather just be like, oh, like they're looking and then they see that it moved and it's pretty clear, but it's just not like laid out for you. But I think people love to like hopefully find that out on their own.
It's the right amount.
But that's like the best part of it, though, is like the subtlety and like the psychological aspects of horror, I think.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
Yeah, because that, well, especially something like this, because like knowing that like you could have had the guy like jump out and scare the crap out of everyone, and that would have been fine. But something like that is like it's too easy. It's lazy. That's the jump scare in movies that movies can do and get away with. And you could have done that in the comic and it would have been like, okay, all right, that's scary. Now they're gonna run away. But this is more subtle and it's like it's unnatural. It's this thing like that shouldn't happen, and like your mind tries to put it together about like that shouldn't happen, but it happened. Now I have to figure out how to like come to grips with that. And with something, and we're just talking about like a picture that moved, and it's like it sounds like so lame when you put it that way, but it works so well on the page because it's like, think about that for a second. If you find a creepy ass old photograph, and suddenly like something changes or moves in the picture or comes out of it, basically, that's not supposed to happen.
Yeah, you're like, right. Yeah, something's not right. Totally. Yeah, I can mention stuff later in the story too.
Absolutely.
That's okay, right? Or are we just sticking? Okay, yeah. So, basically we're like, you see how he like leaves the page in that part, but at the end, I wanted to set up that, he's now out and like they set him free because, she's not totally clear in that scene that he's out. She's kind of like, oh, like maybe, like what the hell was that? And you like see her, the page like reaching out. But then at the end of the issue, like the reader sees like, holy crap, like this dude what is this like nightmare thing that's going to take this kid? And that was the whole intent from the beginning. I knew the last page was going to end with him, like a full splash of him, but it was all kind of leading up to that moment.
Well, it's a definite payoff with that because, again, it's this unnatural quality to it about, like, this shouldn't exist, and all these ideas of, like, the monster under your bed or in a closet or something like that, all of those kind of, like, run at you at the same time with everything that's built up to that point to make this really unsettling cliffhanger there. So, well done there.
Yeah.
How did the design for Mr. Bedtime come about?
Nick, Connor, you go ahead, because I sent you some reference images, and then I think you kind of went for it.
Yeah, actually, I was thinking about that the other day, is that one of the reference photos Nick had sent me way back in the beginning, probably like around, I don't know, maybe 2016 even, when we were first getting together to like put our heads together about this book. He had sent me some reference of what I think was like actually a Halloween prop that you put out on your lawn of
it's some like mummy or something.
Yeah, like a mummy that's like bubbling at the mouth, and it just kind of looks like it's really off its hinges. And there was something to it. There was a creepiness factor to it, and but at the same time, I wanted him in my head. I was picturing him as being barely contained chaos, basically, where he has this suit on, but underneath him are just all these ravels of bandages, and he has this sort of connivingness to him. And I made the comparison to, he's almost Gollum-esque from Lord of the Rings, where he needs something from this world. And I think that's kind of where it all stemmed from. I saw just this creepy guy covered in bandages and in a suit, and I thought that combination of that would be just visually creepy.
Well, mission accomplished. And then, Kelly, do you want to add anything to it in terms of the color design for him?
Actually, Conor did like a lot of the work for character designs and color work and stuff like that.
I had done the first cover issue sometime before Kelly started coloring, and I think that he has a little bit of the color put on him. I think that's the first time I put any color on him. It wasn't the first time I had drawn him, but it was the first time I colored him. And I just stuck with kind of a pale individual with sickly looking skin and this brown beat up suit, thinking that would be the right choice.
I wish I could take credit when when I get complimented for color work, but a lot of times it's like it's on the line artist does a lot of stuff too, so it's also collaborative.
Yeah, color is so important though too. It's incredibly important.
I'm not trying to downplay me. I'm just trying to praise Conor, because Conor is amazing.
You guys are both amazing. Yeah, you guys are both. That's kind of why, Kelly and I worked together on a book before, but I knew you'd be perfect for his art style too, because his is super detailed. So I don't know how challenging that is for you to color all these details, but I imagine it is. Yeah.
I actually really enjoy it because it's like totally different art than what I've colored before. So, and Conor and I worked on Neverboy together too. He did the covers for Neverboy. So that was cool too. Can you hear my dog?
Even if we did, it's fine. He can join in too. He could be a special guest.
He's sitting next to me making noises, so sorry.
So you guys said you started, I guess, talking about the book in 2016. How did that connection first come about? It sounds like some of you have worked together in the past, and was this just kind of like, hey, we have this idea, let's try to put all this together?
Actually, Kelly put me and Nick in. I think Nick was maybe looking for an artist. I don't know. I could be wrong about that.
Yeah.
But somehow Kelly had sent my email to Nick, and then he reached out to me, and then we.
Nick reached out to me and said that he wanted to do another horror book, but this time he wasn't writing it with Zach.
Yeah, he was my brother who I did my last book with.
Yeah, and was looking for an artist, so I sent him like 2 or 3 names, and Conor was one of the people that I sent him. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we originally did like 2 pages at first, and then nothing really happened with it. And then Conor and I did like 6 full pages, like up to that dead body reveal. And then, it ended up happening last year. So we've been talking for like a year before like we started working on the full issues. But that's kind of how comics go.
Yeah, but it's something that ends up happening. So I feel like, I've heard these horror stories about, writers that are like, oh, yeah, like I wrote a screenplay, someone bought it, and it will never see the light of day. But whereas, like, you can write this script, and it might take a year or two, or more, but At the end of the day, you get a comic book out of it.
Yeah, you can make, that's the thing, like we made those first 6 pages on our own. Obviously eventually Dark Horse picked the book up, but we had something to show for our work, which was super cool. I think it took a while to get off the ground too, because I was just constantly revising this first issue. Like there was a version where they were like, they were like on some train or something. It was like really bad, but it was like some train story. But now it's what it is you see. But it just took a while to get to where it is now.
Do you have an idea of, I guess, how many revisions you ended up going through before you settled on this one?
I think the first issue was probably something like, this had to have 6 or 8 drafts or something crazy, which is a lot more than normal. Now it's like, I just finished, or I'm finishing the 4th script, and it's 2. So just these first ones take forever. At least just because I didn't know the characters. They kept changing. What are their backstories? How do they even talk? Because they all have to talk differently. And so a lot of those first drafts was just getting them talking and saying stuff. I know that sounds kind of dumb, but a lot of it just ends up getting thrown out. And then finally you start to like, oh, I've written out this character. It's not a story that is going to be printed, but you know how to like write them, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, like you said, you have to learn who this person is to get an understanding of how they're going to react and ultimately care about them.
Yeah, and it just took a while to get to that point. And I think and then as we wrote to issue 2 and 3, it just got easier and easier it was still hard to come up with the plot and the mystery, because the mystery is still growing at that point. But I think the character stuff was much easier because I just had a very firm grasp on who they were and what they liked, what they hated, and all that.
And how long is the series intended for?
Right now it's intended, we have 4 issues, and we just are finishing up issue 2 right now, fully. We're working on 3, so it's a 4 miniseries.
And how did you end up at Dark Horse? Because I know you've had some previous work there already, but was that just kind of like the foot in the door to go like, hey, I have this other idea? Yeah,
basically, I think a couple years ago when Conor and I did this, we did the 6 pages, and I showed it to Mike Richardson, the Dark Horse president. He was like, yeah, I really like this. Let's talk about how we can do it. And it took a couple months to figure that out, but it ended up working out, and he liked the first 6 pages and trusted the story.
Well, it helps that you have a track record in some previous work too, and the fact that you had done the pitch already, or at least those first 6 pages, that is at least enough to get started. Because if you're just kicking around an idea, that's not something tangible. You had an art team lined up, so that certainly is helpful.
Yeah, I think if everyone is listening, is making comics, I think that's the best advice, is just to make the thing. Just make at least 6 pages or 4 pages or whatever hook you can do at the beginning that's really hooky, I guess. Just kind of a cold open in any way. I think that's just start doing it. Because when I did this, there was no path into Dark Horse. I mean, we could talk to them, but they weren't going to pick it up. But we just did it because I hoped it would become a thing, and we like making it. So that's advice. Just make it, honestly.
Is that how you got picked up for Death Head also?
Yeah, with the first, I think we did like 5 pages with her or something. And then went from there.
Yeah. So make comics. See, like it's funny. Like it always comes back to that. Like I love it. It's the simplest advice, but it works so well. Like that's it. Just if you want to do it, stop talking about it and do it.
Yeah, a couple of years ago I heard that. I was like, make them. You just have to make it. You just have to like write the thing and sit down and write it or color it or draw it, whatever.
And if a publisher doesn't pick it up, kickstart it.
That's true. The age of the Kickstarter.
And that's a totally good way to go too.
Even if you're just starting out, it's still worth a shot. Because look, it doesn't cost that much money to make in the overall scheme of things. You need like a few $100 to get like a small print run together. So that's worth it to try to make it out there.
Exactly.
And plus, you could still get picked up by a publisher anyway, because it seems like they're combing through Kickstarter to look at projects there and what might have a fan base. So,
absolutely
many ways in there.
For sure.
Yeah, I think like 3 or 4 publishers have now picked up a bunch of different Kickstarters.
It's been everybody. So I know Image, Dynamite, Dark Horse has done it too. There's a bunch of IDW, I think, has done it as well. Yeah.
IDW.
They've all been combing through it.
And Oni.
I mean, it makes sense because it's like, all right, this is someone that has proved that they're going to make this, and they've done it. They've raised funds to print it, and they have a proven fan base. Now we could spread this out and distribute it. You're doing all the work for them.
Well, and the largest publisher in the Midwest, Spike Trotman's Iron Circus, like, she is entirely, like, basically run off of Kickstarter. She's hugely successful. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, like, is that a path you could have taken with Bedtime Games if Dark Horse hadn't picked it up?
Yeah, I mean, definitely was in the back of my mind for sure. I think for me, the most important thing at the beginning was, like, make the strongest first 6-page hook I can possibly can. That's not confusing, because a lot of times when I do pick up comics, I'm like, there's a lot of exposition at the beginning, and I had a version there was a lot of exposition. I tried to just stay away from that. I was like, let me just write a scene where these kids are talking about what they're going to do, and then there's a dead body hook, and maybe people want to keep reading. And then I thought if Dark Horse didn't pick up these first 6 pages, then hopefully people on Kickstarter would enjoy them, and we could do that. But we definitely would have done that probably if this didn't work out.
Yeah, you definitely don't hit in the exposition dump with this, and I'm glad, because I can't tell you how many, more so on the indie scene, that oh my god, so many times where it's like you have to read like 6 paragraphs before the story even starts, but like in the year 2049 this has happened, and I'm like, okay, I got the history lesson, and then we go into it.
What comics are you reading?
No idea.
It's everything, because I get people that it's like, hey, I just kickstarted this book, and I'm like, oh, cool, it's an indie comic, I'll check it out, and then it's like, it's rough.
That's like all I buy are like, I shouldn't say that's all I buy, but primarily what I buy are like a lot of anthologies and like Kickstarter books.
Exposition's important, but just for my personal books, I like to keep it in the middle, just when they can get bored in the middle as opposed to the beginning.
But also, maybe don't tell me what books they are.
No,
I
wouldn't do that. And honestly, I can't think of one off the top of my head. It's happened a lot where it's like, what bothers me is like that'll happen, and then 3 pages in they'll be like, oh yeah, like when the revolution happened and this. I was like, what? Like, guys, I just read 6 paragraphs where you told me all this. Now you have this character telling me about it too. Like, that was unnecessary. And it's so frustrating.
Yeah, and honestly, it's not exclusive to comics too. Like, people's attentions are, there's Netflix, there's YouTube, there's YouTube Red, there's all this stuff. Like, if you aren't paying attention, like, people are gonna put the book down. Like, if it's, or whatever it is. So like every single scene has to be suspenseful in some way, be it through conversation or somebody gonna slice your throat with their claws.
Yeah, that's like, and if not that, like everything has to matter. I feel like, in my opinion, comics are like a study in efficiency. So it's like everything has to matter. You have limited time, limited space to tell this story, and everything has to add up to it. It can't just be like, well, this was a cool shot. Like, yeah, it was cool, but like, did it do anything to move the story? Did it develop the characters at all? And if it doesn't check those kind of boxes, then it's like, all right, you kind of just wasted some time there that we could have. It's filler instead of doing some justice to the story.
Totally. And especially because a comic page is roughly, I don't know, Connor, you could probably say like 1 day or 1 or 2 days each page in your life. So it's like, I wouldn't want you to draw anything that, isn't important. I don't want to waste anybody's time, including the artists.
Well, I'll just say, in terms of my comic professional career, I'd still call it pretty young, but I would say that a constant challenge, and a challenge that I enjoy, but a challenge definitely is just including all of the important information to progress the story forward, and kind of trimming the fat, if you will, because like you said, you only have so much space to show this story, and you have to fill a relatively small frame with important enough details to make everything work. So that's definitely a challenge that, like I said, I embrace, but it's something that I've learned just by doing comics.
Yeah, it just takes time.
Right.
And we're still learning too. I mean, that's the thing. Like, I think like you said, like, it has to move the character forward or move the story forward, or it needs to die. Like, if it's not doing that, the I try to cut every line that's like totally unnecessary. Honestly, every word, because balloons are so small. Honestly, like each one can maybe have a sentence or two. So I cut everything that's possible, honestly.
That's the way to do it. You have to be able to kill your darlings with that kind of stuff, and then both with words and with characters, because if you're writing a horror story, like, no one's safe.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the kind of thing as we're doing issues 3 and 4 is you want that feeling of no one's safe, but 4 issues isn't a lot for a story. It's a quick 4 issues, but we wanted to make it feel important or feel like maybe the story will only be 4, maybe it'll be more, who knows, but you want to feel like it could go on or like there is closure, but that's kind of how I'm designing the first book.
Yeah, well, and your first issue is oversized, and you have some extra pages of story in there anyway, so it's like,
Exactly.
I was surprised when I was reading it. I was like, this is still going. Like, these aren't house ads or anything back here. Like, this is all story. Look at this!
Yeah, this is long. Yeah, I told him, I was like, because Conor and I did the 6 pages, I was like, can we do 22 more? Because we already, paid for we already did these on our own, so let's just make a longer issue. And they were totally cool with that.
Prologue.
And I think it really helps.
At that point. So then,
yeah,
okay.
Exactly. The first 6 pages of prologue, and then a lot of the extra 6 came in the character stuff in the middle, with them talking about their backstories and stuff.
You think you were surprised? I was surprised when that many pages showed up in my inbox.
You're like,
what did I sign up for?
No, I was like, whoa, I didn't realize it was going to be this long. This never happens. I also don't receive an entire issue in one go, so that was also really surprising too.
Yeah.
Very rare.
It just kept coming then in that case?
If I'm lucky, a lot of times I'll just get pages out of order from people and I'll have to color behind them.
That's so confusing.
The dream.
Yeah, totally.
Going back to the story for a bit too, I want to jump into this idea of they find a tunnel or something under the school or the area there. Is that does that come from a local urban legend or something? Because I feel like everyone has those kind of things nearby, where it's, oh yeah, that was old man so and so's house or something like that.
Yeah, that's a really good call. There's this cemetery near my house. I actually have written about this in my last book too. But there's this cemetery that my parents, where I grew up. And there's this sewer tunnel. You're totally right. It's we never went in because it's terrifying, but, I think I don't know, for horror stories, I'm somehow obsessed with tunnels below things or, traveling through these underground and these sort of caverns and things like this. My school didn't have this, what they're going through, but there definitely was a sewer tunnel. I can send you the picture after, but it's very similar vibe where it's just kind of oh man, that's a crazy thing. Cause a lot of my friends in high school would go through these things, but I wouldn't. Which is crazy. But yeah, the story itself, I knew I wanted them to be going for one reason, which is, originally they were going to go, I don't really remember, but I wanted the motivation. What would a 17-year-old's motivation be? And it would be to break into the school and drink or whatever, because it wouldn't be anything crazy than that because they're 18 years old. And they're not trying to do anything else. But then I wanted it to be the reveal of there's actually some extremely sinister stuff down here that's going to set this entire thing off and not be good.
Well, I guess it makes me wonder if this is local legend and other people have been down there, how often or how long has Mr. Bedtime been kicking around? Has he come out before? And is this a pattern?
Good questions to ask. Yeah, totally. That's exactly right, man. I mean, I think we delved into that kind of question more in the second issue. But yeah, I think I wanted to plant these seeds what is this thing down here? Obviously someone put this down here at some points. Maybe it was 22 years ago, which that was when it was, or maybe it was 100 years ago. But, I wanted to feel this book that is underwater and this page, had this kind of ancient quality that had been around for a long, long time. But specifically related to the kids, because I could have gone, we'll get more into the next issue of the mystery of the book and the power of basically the essence of the book. Because the first issue is so character focused. But a lot more is revealed in the second issue about what kind of fantasy this book is about. Wouldn't you guys say so?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Yep.
Cool. I get a definite Stephen King vibe from Bedtime Games. So
Totally.
Is that,
I've read 30 of his books. 30 of the 55. So
just moved to Maine already.
I'm only mildly influenced by him. Yeah. I'm kind of a horror nut. I mean, honestly, like I've read 32 of his books. I see every horror movie that comes out. So, I read a lot of Joe Hill, Neil Gaiman. Sandman's a huge influence. Lock and Key is a huge influence. Witches was a huge influence for this book. So I just absorb all this horror stuff. And the best ones I found were the ones that honestly focus less on the blood and guts and more on the characters. And then that's what I'm trying to do here.
That's what I've been tending to gravitate towards more too. Like I reckon, like one of the beauties of the horror genre is that it can kind of do a little bit of everything. So you can have something that's just like blood and guts and gore, and then you can have something that just kind of gets under your skin a little bit more. And I find that tends to stay with me more. And I end up thinking about it a lot more about like, and putting myself in those kind of positions in my head about, well, how would I have reacted to something like that? And I find myself yelling at the comic book now or the television a lot more. I don't know if that's something that came with age, where I'm like, no, don't do it. That's a bad idea. Like, that's a bad idea.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I try to. Stephen King does this a lot, where like in a weird way, the human villains are like more evil than the actual Mr. Bedtime magical villain in a way. Like there's this. I think it's one page where Avery's talking to her aunt, and she's just saying these awful things to her. These terrible things about her, like mother. And, it was horrible to write, but I felt like it's a little bit more relatable for these characters to be just put through hell, honestly. I originally was like very tame, and she was like, "Where are you going?" "Oh, don't worry, I'm just going out," or whatever. But I feel like it works best when you just put these characters through terrible situations. Not in a horrible way, but just in a way that works.
Well, and it helps define who they are too. So you know where Avery's coming from
Exactly.
now. Not only did she go through a tragedy in watching her mother die and in this botched robbery, but she has to deal with this like unloving woman who just clearly does not care about her. And that you're right, and that's even like more sickening than like the literal monster that's in the book is less, unsettling than this cruel woman who would speak that way to a kid.
I wanted to like just every character has their own nightmare. That's kind of the idea behind it. Like that's her nightmare is this horrible woman. This other character, Owen, his brother, unfortunately has a brain tumor, which is just like an awful situation. And I think these real life terrible things, like most humans can relate to something bad that has gone on in their life. And then the other character, has this thing where he wants to be an artist and it's just not working out, and is, absent parents. So each character has some sort of nightmare that they're put through, almost like a pressure cooker, to see how they come out the other side.
Well, that sounds like perfect fodder for Mr. Bedtime too. So it all lines up.
Yeah, well, he knows all the stuff too. Yeah, exactly. He's the one who can you find out more about him later, but he can definitely like manipulate and see what you're afraid of and your nightmares and things like that. He basically feeds off nightmares, and that's what he wants. So I think it's safe to say that these terrible things in real life are fuel for him.
So you mentioned a few influences for the book with things like witches and Stephen King, but are those the kind of horror that you've been ingesting lately? Has there been anything that kind of stood out that you're like, oh, this is what more people should be seeing or reading?
Nothing too under the radar, to be honest. I think I ingest a lot of different kind of stories. Like I don't know. I can't specifically pinpoint one, unfortunately, that's like, oh, this is this indie book. But if you guys have other ones that you have been reading, maybe chime in, because I just read a lot of Stephen King, a lot of Junji Ito, who writes Uzumaki.
Yeah.
Have you heard of that? It's like, super. Yeah. So that's a huge, just for creepy moments, less of the character stuff, but just for very creepy moments. I read a lot of him.
I should really have like a bell or something that goes off anytime that on this show that someone mentions Stephen King or Junji Ito, because it it's kind of nuts, like how it happens so frequently that like it's such a big influence, and it's like I've had to like I wasn't really aware of Junji Ito's work that much before I started the show, and then I've kind of like dove into it, and I was like, oh, this is why people like him so much. This is really creepy. So I've really enjoyed that kind of journey on that side. It's been eye-opening for me.
It's funny that you mentioned him though, because Tomie was like one of my favorite movies in high school, and that's still like one of my favorite horror movies, and that's also based on Ito's work. So
I had no idea that was a movie. Now I'm gonna have to look that up too.
Tomie. I think they made more than one, actually. Yeah, I think they made at least two.
Okay, now I'm gonna have to track that down.
It's really good.
Yeah, gotta check that out.
See, that's also the other thing of me just quickly scratching down names of obscure movies and stuff that I haven't weren't on my radar at all before. So I'm like, oh, now I have to find this. Now I have to find this. This is the homework I get as a result of doing the show.
Do you guys watch like a lot of Asian horror films?
I do not, but I've seen some. I've seen The Grudge and other ones like that. But I saw The Wailing. I think it was on Netflix.
The Eye. It's a Cantonese film. That is also like one of my favorite ones, and that's been remade a bunch too.
No, I haven't either.
That's awesome.
Look it up. See, again, the homework I get.
Yeah, get into it.
I think I've only kind of like seen like the basics in that regard, like things like The Grudge or what is it, the trilogy of like Old Boy and Lady Vengeance and things like that. Like I don't know if you count those as horror, but that I've seen like those kind of things to check off those kind of boxes. And then like really weird ones, like so for a little while before I switched solely to comics with Horror Talk, they would throw me movies and books, and then like I got to the point where I'm like, I can't deal with all these, because like I would get movies like Big Tits Zombie, and I'm like, what is this? Like,
that sounds awesome.
I mean, that was one, like, it wasn't bad, because it's like, this is just ridiculous, and it's like a bunch of schoolgirls with like axes and machine guns, and I'm like, alright, like, I see where this is coming from, but then there's just like too many, like, there was one really weird one with like Callista Flockhart, where she's like in a hospital or something like that, and I was like, stop. I was like, can I just do comics now, guys? Like, I don't know if I had to like pay my dues or something when I started out. Like, no more of this. Can I just handle comics? Like, yeah, fine. Just go do the comic stuff and leave us alone. So.
I also really like Suicide Circle. It's got like a bunch of names, but that's another Japanese film. That one's really good too.
So, no, all right.
Classic.
I learned something new from you guys. This is great. But yes, between that and him and Stephen King, like, just has popped up so frequently with that. Do you have a go-to Stephen King book then? Of like of all the ones that you read?
That's a good question. People ask me, yeah. I mean, I'm a huge Dark Tower fan. It's not as much horror. That really, I love Dark Tower. But my favorite like novel of his, which I think is actually really creepy, is Pet Sematary. I think that's the book that, if people ask me where to start, I think that's a good one, because it's short, but it's also creepy. Really creepy. I don't know if you guys have read that.
Yeah, I've read that. For some reason, like, I feel like a lot of other folks start with Stephen King at a much too young of an age. And yes. we all kind of get in there, and then it's like, oh, they're reading, good. Yeah, keep reading these books, and without any real idea what the content was. So,
yeah, and you're like, oh my god.
Yeah, that was definitely one that stood out early on.
But he has so many. That's the thing. Like, you could read, that he came out with a couple books a couple years ago. Like the Mr. Mercedes, just like, I think it's like police thrillers, and he's just like can write so much different stuff. That's why it's amazing if you're a fan of his, because you can just read everything. I really like his son's work too, Joe Hill. He has some amazing
currently
books
about like a third of the way through Nosferatu, so I'm saying it that way. I don't know if that's how it's pronounced. That's how it looks, but yeah, I'm about a third of the way through that.
Yeah, they both influenced me a lot, and then a lot of there's a lot of movies and anything. Yeah, that's the thing. It's a horror story, but I love Breaking Bad. Like, maybe I influenced by that in some weird way.
Well, I mean, look, there are worse things to influence your work when it comes to a horror story than Stephen King. So I think having that vibe definitely resonates, and I mean it's a good formula. So that kind of thing, it could definitely work well, and I think it comes across in Bedtime Games.
Cool. That's good to hear, man.
Yeah, it's a compliment.
Cool. So it looks like the first issue of Bedtime Games comes out on June 27th. Anything else you want to tease going into the first issue?
I think to tease going into the first issue is just I think expect a lot of character-based stuff, but it definitely takes a turn for the fantastical, and I don't think you would be expecting like how the second issue would go based on this first issue. I think that's what I would say. I don't know if Connor, you agree with that, but
yeah, I totally agree with that.
I think it takes kind of a left turn that people would maybe not totally be expecting, in a more of a fantasy way, not anything ridiculous where they become like animals or something, but there's definitely
but there's more play with play within like the dreamscape. There's more dreamlike things.
And I try to keep we try to keep this book as grounded as possible, because when you're dealing with dreams and fantasy and other worlds and stuff, you can just go off the rails in one page. So everything, I'd say expect a fantastical story that you're able to keep a grasp on, hopefully.
That's Emily, look, if you're taking a twist after what happens with the first issue, I'm very curious. Now you've definitely piqued my interest in where you're going to go next. So yeah, really looking forward to where that takes us then.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. It's good.
And then where are the best places to find you guys online? Like any social handles, plugs you wanna throw out here?
Why don't you guys take that first?
Sure. You can find me. I'm pretty active on Instagram and Twitter. Instagram's Nolan Illustration, and Twitter is Conor_draws. And yeah, that's where I spend most of my social media time. What about you, Kelly?
I am pretty much only on Twitter, and I'm at Wasted Wings.
And I'm pretty inactive, honestly, but you could find me, I think it's at Nick F. Keller on Twitter and Instagram. But I'll hopefully become more active as these roll out and post more stuff. And Connor's posting a lot of art, which is super cool. And yeah, that's where you can find us.
Oh yeah, my dog has an Instagram too.
Oh, I don't think I follow him or her.
It's him, and it's on Instagram at Boston Boy Archie.
All right, I
post more there than I do anywhere else, honestly.
Yeah, post a photo of him holding the first issue when you get your copy.
I absolutely will.
That's a great endorsement.
I also have a pet Instagram, and mine's
It's so good.
Mayor of Puppytown, and it's my dog, Sophie.
Wait,
it's his dog being the mayor. It's hilarious.
Wait, is it?
Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna follow this right now.
The mayor of Puppytown or Mayor Puppytown?
That's a good question. I think it's Mayor of Puppytown. Yeah, it's Mayor of Puppytown.
So
the captions are so witty.
She's a forward-thinking dog. What can I say?
So
I don't have a dog, but we'll have an Instagram.
Yeah. Clearly, that's what you have to do when you do get a dog. You need to throw them on Instagram.
Yeah. And then pitch it on a podcast.
Yeah, do it for the gram.
Yeah. Like when I get my comps for Archie, my dog Archie is a big fan, so he takes photos of them.
Right.
Yeah. So look, we'll definitely link up the social handles for you guys and your dogs in the show notes for the show as well. But yeah, otherwise, look, Bedtime Games #1 comes out on June 27th from Dark Horse Comics. I'll have a review for me and Horror Talk as well. But yeah, definitely check it out wherever you get your comics, whether it's local or on digitally. But yeah, that is it then for this episode of Funny Book Splatter. I've been James Ferguson with my guests Nick Keller, Conor Nolan, and Kelly Fitzpatrick. You've been listening to Funny Book Splatter, a horror comics podcast brought to you by HorrorTalk.com. We've been bringing you the best in horror since 2002. In addition to comics, we cover movies, TV shows, books, and video games. We've got news, reviews, guest features, interviews, unboxing videos, and much more. Be sure to sign up to Steve's Deals newsletter to increase your horror collection without breaking the bank. Check us out at horrortalk.com and at horrortalk on Twitter.